just a quick summary of what the HE Hub is. I know we've done a few of these now, and I like to just spend a bit of time just introducing what the hub was, created for. And it was essentially to sort of create a forum where we can raise themes that are prevalent to the sector. So there's been a lot of impact in the last couple of months, various different things. So we just want to bring to the play really themes that, like I say, relevant to institutions, people in the sector, and just have as a sort of discussion point really, just talking through that with your peers, and just unearthing all the benefits and challenges that people that have faced really. So I know, Elliot, you've introduced yourself already. I just wanted to just bring up your profile there, and I haven't put your email address on, but at the end of the session, we'll put that on so people can contact you for any relevant questions to the stuff you're going to talk about. But ultimately, Elliot's going to be going through, sharing through the latest features and functionality across the business applications platform that underpin the student lifecycle in today's session. So having a focus on the customer insights functionality and how it can be used as sort of a learning analytics solution, and then providing that actionable insight into student engagement. And then once Elliot's finished and gone through his slides, we'll then introduce you to Nathan, who will just talk through a few examples around some data stuff that we've done with current customers, and just finish it off there. So on that note, if I hand that over to you, Elliot.
Shall I just quickly say, if you've got anything you want to add or questions, just please use the raise the hand tool. I forgot to say that at the start. So yeah, just make sure that if you've got anything you want to say, just say it, or just use the raise the hand tool.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, the beauty of having such a small group like this is I'm very happy for you to just kind of butt in and ask questions as we go through. The point of this is to be useful for you on the call. So if anything comes to mind, please just shout. So yeah, thanks Crimson, and thanks Tom for the introduction. It's great to be able to chat to you on here this afternoon, and also to be able to pull this content together ready for a recording for other people to listen to at a future date. So the plan for me for the next sort of 30-40 minutes, and as I say, this is absolutely intended to be an informal forum. Let's have discussion, ask questions throughout, and let's kind of keep this two-way. But I wanted to spend a few minutes just doing a bit of a level set on our business applications platform and on Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform, because there's kind of a precedent that understanding is there before we dive into some of the specifics. I'll then hone that in on the HE market, and specifically what we do with our great partners like Crimson to focus on the higher education market and how our BizApps platform supports that sector. Then going to bring it to life with a few examples so you can see what the sector is doing with our platform. And then I guess the main focus of today's conversation is on how we can utilize the tools that are native within the Microsoft Business Application Platform to provide a learner analytics mechanism to support you in understanding how your learners and your students are engaging with you as an institution and take action. And Paul, I noted that you said that you worked in a market insights team or headed up a market insights team, and I'm sort of assuming from that you're maybe less focused on the learner analytics side, but more what's going on in the market, and so hopefully this kind of message and the concept behind these analytics from a learner perspective will absolutely lift to a prospective student's perspective, for example. I noticed you come off mute. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's true up to a point. Obviously, our principal interest within my specific team is, as you say, the recruitment side, enrollment management, as it would be known in the US. But I'm actually part of a larger team which kind of has a dotted line into another, which is actually taking learning analytics forward. It was certainly an area I found very interesting enough to go to a conference on, and might have got a bit more hands-on involved in had I had the bandwidth to pursue it. But there are others fairly close to me in the organisation that are doing so, because a lot of, as I think we'll touch upon, a lot of the underlying disciplines in terms of generating the digital contact points and then what you do with them statistically afterwards to hunt for particular predicted outcomes are very similar.
Exactly. So, these what I'll talk about will hopefully resonate with most of your focus from a market insights perspective, but also hopefully you'll be able to take some of the learner analytics learnings back to Birmingham. So let's start with that level set then. So you'll hear me talk about Microsoft's business application platform, largely because it's my job to do that. But what I mean by that is Dynamics 365 and our Power Platform. So the Power Platform, I'll dive into this in a little bit more detail in a second, is made up of 4 component parts. So Microsoft Power BI, Power Apps, Power Virtual Agent, and Power Automate. And this platform is designed to extend and to be extendable and adaptable to the rest of your Microsoft ecosystem and beyond. Actually, we have hundreds of connectors that sit within the Microsoft ecosystem and outside of it. But the idea is this all sits at the heart of your technology architecture. And surrounding that on the screen, we've got what we call our first-party Dynamics 365 apps. So Dynamics is a modular platform that allows you to sort of pick and choose the bits that you want to turn on at various points for your organization. Traditionally, Dynamics has been thought of as a CRM system, and Dynamics absolutely has CRM capability, and that will always be an important part of the platform. But you will very intentionally never hear me use the acronym CRM other than this kind of explanation at the beginning, because Dynamics these days is so much more than a CRM platform. We typically talk about the platform in 2 halves. So we talk about customer engagement, which is where that traditional customer relationship management or student relationship management capability sits. And then the other half is our finance and operations half of the platform. So back office functions that allow you to run the fundamental components of your organization. And most of the work that we see in higher education very much falls on the customer engagement side of the platform, as you can imagine, given the objectives that the sector has. But more and more we're seeing higher education customers interested in what we can do from a back office kind of ERP, enterprise resource planning, finance and operations type set of capabilities. So eventually an organization can run everything end to end with Dynamics, really. So there are first-party Dynamics apps. In addition to those apps, we've then got what we call our insight services. Now, critically for these, there is no requirement for you to be already invested in Microsoft technology or in Dynamics 365 to make use of these insight services. These are effectively layers of AI run on Azure, our Microsoft cloud, that allow you to drive insight and predict trends and spot opportunities to take action across a whole range of data sources, both within the Microsoft platform and outside of the Microsoft platform. Now, of course, your implementation is going to be a bit easier if those data sources are Microsoft ones, but that is not a requirement for them to be for them to be Microsoft ones. And actually, we see lots of customers use something like customer insights or customer service insights as a dip in their toe within the water of Dynamics 365, because it's an opportunity for them to see how the platform interacts with the rest of their technology ecosystem before going whole hog and investing in some of our other platforms. And later on, I'm going to really focus in on customer insights as that learner analytics platform that I mentioned. And then finally, we've got our mixed reality application. So pretty out of scope for today's conversation, but I wanted to make sure that you had an awareness that our mixed reality applications like Remote Assist, Product Visualize, Layout and Guides are all sitting on this same Microsoft Business Applications platform. So let's say as a higher education organization in a pre or post-COVID world that you are at a UCAS fair or you're at a higher education recruitment event and you've got a mixed reality device like our HoloLens giving a 360-degree virtual tour of campus. Because this all sits on the same platform, you can be assured that all of the data, all of the intelligence you're capturing by having that interaction with a potential prospective student is coming into the same Dynamics 365 business applications ecosystem for you to be able to act upon that data. So if I'm having that 360-degree tour of the University of Birmingham, for example, I know that the data that you as an institution are capturing about my engagement is going to sit alongside my ongoing student record, my lead, if you like, as I hopefully go ahead and apply to the institution and become enrolled. So as I said, kind of out of scope for today's conversation, but just to give you reassurance that capability is all sitting on this platform for you to be able to utilize. Now, I said I'd focus a little bit more detail on the Microsoft Power Platform, and I will just for a second, despite it not being critical for the customer insights piece, it is a massive area of growth and investment for Microsoft and a platform that the education sector is lapping up, for want of a better phrase. So I said it's made of 4 component parts. The first is Power BI, which is our data visualization analytics tool. So allows you to connect a whole bunch of data sources into this single platform to allow you to visualize and spot trends, etc., within within those data sources. We've then got Power Apps, which is our low-code, no-code citizen development application platform. So allows you to build scenario-specific applications in a kind of PowerPoint-style environment with Excel-level code to support your teams and your staff in innovating and driving digital transformation without deep involvement from IT. There absolutely needs to be a bit of oversight from IT from a governance perspective, but you're not having to invest in dozens of developers to do this work. Power Automate, which is our workflow automation tool, formerly known as Microsoft Flow, that effectively allows you to have applications talk to each other that maybe traditionally don't talk to each other. And that can be from really simple workflows like an approval flow, so for someone's expenses or to raise a PO internally, right through to much more complicated things like embedding robotic process automation functionality to be able to connect two legacy applications to drive a process. And then the last leg on the Power Platform chair is Power Virtual Agents, which is our chatbot platform, which not only allows you to deliver kind of basic FAQs, back and forth FAQ type conversations, but also allows you to trigger workflow. So actually, from within a Power Virtual Agent conversation, you might want someone to authenticate. You might want to submit an application from that chat, to raise a case, to check the status of an extenuating circumstances application or a PGT application, a direct PGT application, check the status of that. So all of that is possible within the Power Virtual Agents platform. And the reason this is all sitting within the Microsoft Business Applications platform, and the reason that the value add is so great is because it is underpinned by what we call the Common Data Service. Now, a big caveat on that, the name of that is about to change, so don't get too used to using and hearing CDS, but the Common Data Service is effectively a really, really functionality-rich database that underpins all of these applications. So any records that you've got that sits within that Common Data Service, regardless of which of these applications that I've mentioned are trying to access it, it's the same source of truth. You can very easily bring together that 360-degree view of that record or of that entity or of that account because it's all sitting within the CDS. Any questions so far before I hone in on HE? I realized that was a kind of whistle-stop tour of our business applications platform. Cool. Okay. So let's bring this to the sector that we all work in and care about. How does this come to life in education? So everything that we do as Microsoft from an education perspective is focused on what we call our ETF, our Education Transformation Framework. And this framework highlights the 4 key bubbles, if you like, that we're really focused on. The first is on academic research. So how do we support higher education organizations with our kind of deep cloud infrastructure, our sophisticated AI and machine learning to support academic research? The second is on secure and connected campus. So how do we support you in running complex, large estates with our technology and an integrated technology at that? So, for example, how you might be able to deploy technicians, for example, to a halls of residence because something is going wrong and that's being picked up by an IoT sensor. That's our second pillar of support. The third is around teaching and learning. So how do we support you in delivering teaching and learning both on and off campus, which I think is more important than ever before. And that is everything from the really practical stuff, like the platforms in which you deliver that teaching through, but also more fundamental things like how do we support you in building a computer science curriculum using the latest and greatest technology. And then the area that gets lots of my attention and is absolutely the focus of today's conversation is around student success. So how do you use Microsoft's vast range of technologies to underpin your student recruitment processes, your student support processes to make sure you retain students, your alumni engagement processes to make sure that you have a relationship with them right through beyond the day they graduate. And actually that leads me nicely on to what our kind of BizApps proposition looks like in education. We absolutely talk about this single platform underpinning the entire student data lifecycle. So I always use the example that I ended up studying at Cardiff University. I first visited Cardiff University when I was in year 10 on a school trip. Now, unfortunately, I guarantee that when I was applying for Cardiff in year 12 through UCAS or year 13 through UCAS, that university didn't know I was the same Elliot Howells that was applying that visited in year 10. But how powerful would that be if they did know that? How powerful would it be if they knew that their widening participation and outreach activities were working? And how do we use that same record right through the student life cycle, through to the day they graduate, or I graduated, and beyond. And I'm not saying that the view and the users and the individuals that engage with that record at various stages throughout the student life cycle are going to be the same, are going to happen in the same way. Yes, we're going to be looking at this through a different lens. We're going to be looking at a dashboard and looking at different data throughout this life cycle. But if we can keep an element of consistency of that record, the opportunities for you to understand how your students are engaging with you, for you to be able to intervene before it becomes too late, so before that student becomes a dropout or becomes unwell, and that's what we're going to focus on later. The opportunity for you to build brilliant employer engagement relationships by that alumnus offering placement or offering career support, or even donating to your institution. Effectively, the opportunities are really, really quite vast when we've got this single platform underpinning all of this. And we as Microsoft very much recognize that education is a sector that we should be investing in, we should be supporting in. And a real lovely, tangible example of that is our latest release of our Microsoft Higher Education Accelerator. So Dynamics 365 and the wider business applications platform is an industry agnostic solution, as are most of our platforms. You know, there's a counterpart for me for pretty much every other industry. But what we try and do is give customers and partners the skills and the tools that they need to be able to build on top of our platform to make it sector specific. So our Higher Education Accelerator is a brilliant example of how we've done that for Dynamics 365. We have effectively given customers and partners the ability to build on top of our vanilla Dynamics, our out-the-box Dynamics, and make it education specific. So this is a totally free of charge education version of our common data service that I mentioned earlier, that effectively gives customers a bit of an acceleration, a bit of a kickstart. The entities are called students instead of customers, for example. We have dashboards there that traditionally the education market would use, and we've consulted with the education market when building this out. And so this is it's for me a stamp of confidence that Microsoft cares about the sector. More importantly for you, it's a head start in if you roll out these platforms to get something in place a little bit quicker than you would if you were doing that from scratch. And Crimson are building on top of this stuff. I'm sure Tom and Nathan will go into a bit more detail later, but the work that Crimson do from an implementation perspective makes use of these sorts of platforms. They are building and adding functionality to what we are providing. So you can be confident by investing in Crimson solutions and in Crimson's accelerators that you are kind of being backed by the wider work that's happening within Microsoft, and however we continue to evolve our platforms will also trickle down to the way that Crimson are doing it. So let's bring this to life. How we're actually seeing this play out in education, and we've got dozens and dozens and dozens of education customers in the UK, but I wanted to show you some that I think are doing particularly interesting things. So Staffordshire University, they recognised a few years ago that they massively needed to change the way they were engaging with prospective students and current students actually, but the main focus initially was on prospective students. And so they came to market for a platform that would enable them to get a really deeper understanding of their prospective students and to be able to better engage with those students to drive personalization in their communications. And their first phase of CRM, as they call it, CRM phase 1, went live last year with the objectives to increase personalization, to improve internal resource utilization by driving automation with our platform, and ultimately, as we all would want to achieve a return on the investment they're making. In the first year this platform went live on Dynamics 365, their undergraduate applications increased by nearly 12% and their postgraduate by close to 23%. So they're already seeing the return on that investment, and that is now feeding into their phase 2, which focuses on international recruitment, that will eventually feed into the rest of the student life cycle. So they'll then be taking that through to on-course students, so how do we support students using this platform, and then how do we engage with our alumni to truly make use of that cradle to grave example that I showed earlier. Northumbria University is the second example that I've got to share, and they very much focus on student support as opposed to recruitment, very much on trying to get a single point of contact for students. Before they rolled out Dynamics 365, all of their systems were disparate. There wasn't a single place for students to go to be able to log a concern or to get help, and so they rolled out Dynamics 365 with a portal sitting on top of it. In the first year alone, bear in mind that the platform will continue to grow beyond this. They had close to 10,000 student support portal messages, and the reason I think that is compelling and important is because up until this went live, those 10,000 messages would have been landing in an inbox or a student turning up on campus between 8 and 6 to get an answer. And they had no process of following up with students for students to check the status of their cases. So that was 10,000 student support inquiries, basically just going there in the hope that somebody would pick them up. Now, the fact they were able to have this portal meant that they could drive real insight, and that in the first year alone, they identified 280 students that were at risk, 68 of which were at risk of suicide. And again, that is intel they wouldn't have been able to get in their previous world. Their hardship funding request process in Dynamics went down from a 12-week process to a 4-week process, and the only reason it went down to that it was still at 4 was because of the internal governance mechanisms that they had to go through. At the time that we got this information, their average knowledge article views were 8,000. Again, really critical, because before this point, there was no place for someone to go and get that information, and they are already seeing improvements as part of NSS results. So back on that ROI stuff, their students are responding to this. And a really simple but lovely quote from a student support manager there, who has literally said Dynamics has changed their life, which is great. The penultimate example I wanted to share was a Crimson customer. So Crimson are currently in the middle of a fairly significant implementation of Dynamics at the University of Salford, and John McCarthy was actually featured on one of these hubs a few weeks ago, talking about the work that they're doing. But this particular snapshot looks at what they've done from getting a single source of truth and a single point of reference for students. They're focused on recruitment and admissions. They had a goal to increase student recruitment by 700 students a year. And you can see John there, the former CIO, talking about how they had 17 different CRM instances across the organization. And Crimson spent time with them to sort all that out, sort all the plumbing out, to get a single instance in place to enable them to work towards that single source of truth for a single point of reference, and ultimately better engage and communicate with prospective students. The last example I wanted to share, again, has 17 different CRM systems, but is a little further away, the University of New South Wales in Sydney. And the reason I call this out, I don't particularly love using examples from different regions, but Australia has a fairly similar or comparable education market to the UK. But the return on investment they've seen from a financial perspective is really quite compelling. And so I kind of want to use this to inspire the UK market. In their first year alone of moving from 17 disparate CRMs to Dynamics 365, they saw a saving of 250,000 Australian dollars in their marketing and recruitment budget alone, and that's without the additional $40,000 of decommissioning systems. They talk very, very openly about the fact that they have implemented Power Automate, Office 365, Dynamics 365, and the wider Azure ecosystem, and are incredibly proud that they have delivered more value in a shorter space of time than they ever have before. And so there are plenty of examples of customers that are doing incredible things with this platform out there. And I guess my job and the job of the rest of the Crimson team are to make sure that the UK market sees the opportunity here and invests in these kind of platforms. And I think that is more important than ever before, given what we are all in the middle of and what we've been going through for the last 6 months. Nicola Anderson, who is the Director of Digital Marketing at the University of Nottingham, shared a quote with us a couple of weeks ago, which was that the pandemic has served to highlight the importance of strategic capability in a complex environment. Connecting digitally with our audiences and digital agility has never been more valuable. So, I'm sure we'd all agree that this has been pretty important for the last few years, but the fact that we are in the middle of a global pandemic and are trying to serve our audiences remotely massively brings to the front how important this is today to get right. So I hope that was helpful to kind of bring that to life. So I've spoken about how we've got dozens and dozens of institutions that are doing this right across the country, and how we want to support those institutions with driving engagement right across the student journey. But what I wanted to really hone in on as part of today's conversation was about how we maximize student retention and graduation by intervening early when students might become at risk. Now, we're going to have a bit of audience participation for a couple of minutes, and I'd originally planned for this to be in a kind of online poll that we get results in immediately. But given there's such a small number, we can just come off mute and have a chat. So do you know if your institutions are currently measuring and tracking the engagement of your students centrally? You know, I know there'll be lots of systems across the board that are looking at how often people are going to the library or what they're doing from a grades perspective, but is that being managed centrally anywhere?
We've got a centrally managed pilot at the moment.
What platform is that using, Paul?
Sorry?
What platform is that using?
I don't know. Given the people involved, it's probably something quite techy. I think we are definitely one of those institutions that has numerous separate systems for all of those things and is looking at a one solution fits all platform. We have looked once before some years ago and there was nothing there that fitted the bill. We're looking again, and certainly, you know, it's there's not many platforms that do it, and this is obviously one of them. But obviously with the massive caveat that at the moment all our budgets are written in extremely light pencil rather than ink. So the timeframes for that are very much up in the air again.
Yeah. Okay. Jim, is
Elliot,
that?
I was just going to add, actually, and looking back to my own university days, which were many, many years ago now, 20 years ago, but interestingly for me, just hearing you talk and how you presented that, you know, the emotional, you know, we obviously talk about digital world and needing to grab and track things virtually and all of that, which is so important, especially in these times. But I think what you really captured for me when you shared the slide with the quite poignant data around, you know, at-risk students, you know, that for me really rang home with how important it is for students to have and be able to be contactable in the moment, you know. And I think, like you've just highlighted, if these organizations have got so many disparate CRM systems, all capturing, rightly so, the different touch points that students make, but are not able to look at that from a single view and assess that risk, my goodness, that is worrying, isn't it? Because that, you know, students rely heavily on, you know, a lot of these students are very, you know, for the first time having to be very independent, the financial worries, you know, the society we live in, all the pressures of all of that, and that emotional reach and that ability to connect quickly, and for them to feel that something is happening. You know, and I'm looking at this from a real outsider's perspective with two kids at school, you know, and looking at what their future looks like. That for me is really hit a nerve more than anything, really, I think. And that I just wanted to share that, really.
For sure. And no, thanks for sharing, Louise. And one of the challenges that the education sector doesn't have that some other sectors have is a lack of data sources. You know, we as an industry, as a sector, there is data coming out of our ears. We've got systems for libraries, system for grades, systems for attendance, students' union engagement data, employer engagement data. There's data all over the place. What is not being done, I was going to say what is not being done well enough. What is not being done at all, in my experience, is the amalgamation of that data to be able to drive insight. And that is absolutely where I think the opportunity is. That leads me wonderfully on to talking about how we can support higher education institutions by driving learning analytics with Dynamics 365. So you've heard me talk about the kind of platform and the various elements of that platform. And if I kind of take your mind back to one of my earlier slides where I spoke about the various rings, if you like, of our platform. On top of those first-party apps, we've got our insight services, and this is where this capability fundamentally sits. And one of those products within that second ring was Dynamics 365 Customer Insights. Now, when this product was first released a year or so ago, I know for a fact that the main objective of this, that the main market, if you like, the main set of functionality that this was providing was focused on attracting customers. I'm going to call them customers because I'm kind of taking a step back from education for a moment. The platform was designed for commercial organizations to really deeply understand how their customers were engaging with them, how they could engage with them, and therefore how they can build a better relationship with them to increase revenue, frankly. You know, so it's how we have a great example of a theme park called Tivoli in Copenhagen. How does that organization understand how their customers are accessing their services, how they buy their tickets, when they buy their tickets, and how do we use that disparate data to be able to better serve them and increase the engagement with us as an organization? And that's a great use case, and actually I think that's probably also applicable to education. And the example you shared earlier about Paul, about the work you're doing, that element of understanding how someone's engaging with you from a prospective student scenario is absolutely relevant for the education space. But the area where I think we've got more opportunity and an incredible opportunity to make a genuine difference is how we utilize this sort of platform to maximize engagement and intervene before it becomes too late. So if I flip to my next slide, which is a bit of an eyesore, but I think it does a pretty good job of calling out how this stuff works. So let's imagine all of those disparate data sources we've got across an HE organization. They've mentioned a few, but it could be how often someone's going to the library, what the trends of their grades are, how they are, how they're engaging with the students' union. Are they turning up to football practice on a Wednesday afternoon? Have they gone to their personal tutor session? Are they connecting to Wi-Fi on campus? And these are all data sources that I know the education sector captures. This is data that you're all holding, but probably in lots of different systems. What conversations are they having? What is the sentiment of those conversations with student support? How often are they flagging that they're at risk? So how do we bring all those data sources together? How do we then, one of the things that the system does is unifies that data, so this kind of middle part of the diagram on the screen. So we bring together behavioral information, such as where are they going, when are they going, demographic data, who are they, what's their background, what's their, how old are they, how do different demographics engage with the institution versus other demographics, transactional data, so how are they engaging with student support as an example, bringing all that together, conflating it, ingesting it, matching it, and enriching it to provide analytics using our artificial intelligence and machine learning tools to then, this is the really important bit, to actually drive action. So let's imagine a scenario where you bring all these data sources together, then you have a personal tutor who has a dashboard of the 25 students that they support, and that dashboard then flags when someone's engagement score drops below a level. That then gives that individual an opportunity to reach out to that student and just check they're okay. Check in to find out, is there anything you can be doing as an institution to better support them? And that turns your support model from being reactive to proactive. And the benefit of that is, there are plenty of benefits to that. You might stop that student becoming unwell. You might stop that student from dropping out of university, and that is awful for a whole bunch of reasons, from that student's progression perspective, but potentially also from a revenue perspective for you as an institution. And so what we're trying to get across is, this concept of learner analytics isn't brand new. This is something that's been spoken about for the last couple of years, but what we are providing here is an opportunity for you to do this, what is traditionally seen as a really complex process, within a single platform that sits on top of the Microsoft ecosystem that you are probably already invested in or on your way to investing in. And this stuff is pretty much available out of the box. We connect to a bunch of data sources. We do a bit of unification using the Azure platform and the AI that's built into it. And then we output the analytics for you to be able to drive action upon. And this screen will do a much better job of explaining that than I just did. So we are able to predict student intent, for example. So what are we thinking they are next going to do? How do we look at what their behavior has been over a period of time to predict how they are next going to react? How we can spot trends and patterns. So is it, for example, that your BME students, as an example, are less engaged than your non-BME students? And what could that tell you about how you're engaging with that demographic of student? You're able to create richer segments. So using all this behavioral, transactional, and demographic data, how do we segment students to truly personalize your communication? I remember I was student union president when I was in university, and we had this, I guess, a relatively simple challenge, but we discovered that every single student was receiving our same communications on a Wednesday afternoon from the union. Now, we were sending our Islamic Society information about our nightclub events, and it was just deplorable. You know, that is the easiest thing that we could have fixed, to recognise there's a pretty good chance that if you're a member of the Islamic Society, you're also probably not interested in our boozy Wednesday night activities. And that is a really straightforward example of how we need to better communicate with students by segmenting them. And this platform will allow you to do that in an automated, sophisticated way, which then will drive personalized engagement across your channels, and eventually will enable you to automate student-centered experiences. So using tools like Power Automate, how do you utilize all that rich data that you've got in place to be able to send out communications and send out invitations for them to engage with you in a way that is personalized? I've just got a couple of screenshots to bring to life really how this looks, and forgive me for 30 seconds for being a bit technical, but ultimately this is a single platform built on top of the Microsoft Business Applications Suite that first requests that you choose a bunch of data sources, then asks you to match those data sources to a bunch of entities that you've got sitting in within your Dynamics 365 environment or Dynamics 365 Customer Insights environment, and then presents an out-of-the-box dashboard that presents a bunch of out-of-the-box stats, such as their churn, how much they're, this is a commercial example, how much they're spending with you as an organization, what their demographic looks like, are they likely to purchase again in a commercial world. But obviously this is totally configurable. This is just what you get out of the box, what's their interests, what their brand affinities. Now, I will be the first to admit that we have no higher education customers in the UK that are doing this yet on this platform, and that is because this is still really new, and Microsoft's focus up until this point has been on commercial customers effectively looking to sell more. Now, I am desperate to find higher education customers prepared to work with us and to work with a partner like Crimson to get this to get this in place, so we can really understand the return on investment that you can make. And I don't mean that necessarily from a financial perspective. I mean it from a driving student engagement perspective, increasing student satisfaction, and better supporting your students. However, what I can share is examples of other sectors that have seen similar successes to the ones that I hope this sector sees. So UNICEF, for example, rolled out customer insights to better engage with their donors, and they've now been able to understand what their donors care about, how they want to engage with UNICEF, how do they personalize their communications to be able to better increase the chance of them donating and engaging with their projects. So that was a kind of honing in on the learner analytics piece that I wanted to do. I hear a lot that this stuff is, for certain audiences, can be considered controversial. You know, you are effectively gathering a whole bunch of data from students, and of course there would be appropriate mechanisms in place so they know that you're gathering that data, and they're able to based on GDPR rules, they're able to opt out of that sort of stuff. But how, again, Paul and Jim, I guess I'm looking at you, how do you feel about the institutions that you work for gathering this sort of information to engage with students?
Well, I'm fine with it, but I'm not a student. I mean, it's how you feel about that matters, I think.
Yeah.
I think there's a variety of viewpoints. So the conference I mentioned I went to was the Scottish QAA one, which I ended up going to the Scottish one partly because the dates matched better than the English one, but also because it was covering learning analytics that year. And there was quite a few presentations there from various pilot exercises, and interestingly, each of them had a very different perspective on what the students wanted to see. So there are some schools of thought that say, absolutely, this generation is completely used to this kind of stuff. They're used to Amazon telling them that people like you bought things like this, and they don't see any problem with it. There were others that were opposed to that, to the point of view that there was a very interesting talk from someone whose name I'm sure will come back to me later, suggesting that as these students are generating the data, which is down the line generating commercial advantage, they should have some kind of commercial stake in the creation of that data, and others of the point of view that what a lot of students just want to see is how what they are doing compares to their peer group, because that's something which, having been a student without the benefit of this is oversight, is often quite difficult to know. Am I working as hard as my peers? Am I doing as well as my peers? And the targeted intervention stuff is does seem to be somewhat more controversial. I'm reminded of a study a year or two ago, which was around when they Sam Giemer was very much about giving universities loco parentis, which is a bit ridiculous for people over the age of 18, but there was a move towards getting students to opt in to allowing us to contact their parents if they are going through a crisis, and the threshold of what that crisis was varied. And the support for that was surprisingly high. So certainly my suspicion is that so long as it is introduced in a consultative way, that everybody understands what is and is not being collected and what it's being used for, the outcomes for this are entirely positively based. Yes, you might get the odd embarrassing phone call or intervention that's unnecessary. You may be being asked, are you experiencing a mental health crisis? And frankly, all you're experiencing is an inability to get out of bed in the morning. But I think if it's handled well, I think it is a door that is, swinging open rather than one that needs a lot of pushing.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with everything you've said, to be honest, Paul. And actually, you raise a really good angle there about how we are currently looking at this from a how does the institution get data to support their students perspective. But there is nothing stopping this kind of platform also being used to give data to students. So, imagine the power of being able to log on to a portal as a student and being told that based on our historical data, we think you're currently on track to achieve a first. To achieve a 2-1, sorry, our data shows that if you spent another 5 hours a week in the library, that your chances of increasing a first increased by 50%, for example. That sort of data back out to students, so they feel like they're getting immediate benefit as well as the institution. Cool. Well, to be honest, that's all I wanted to cover, and I'm very keen to open up to a kind of conversation and a bit of Q&A. And I think Nathan and Tom are going to kind of pick up on some of the things that we've spoken about as well. But I hope that was a useful overview of the sort of work that we're doing and the opportunity we see in the sector to be able to support.
Very much so. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Elliot. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, Elliot, just picking up on the point you mentioned there, a couple of the universities we work with, when they've done some research into this, I think getting the student population to share information if they see value, and specifically if they see that they are in some way competing with others as well, they are very open to then using platforms that share their information and collaborate. It seems to be a generational thing anyway. I think there is a bit there that they have to be, seem to be getting value from it rather than they are being pestered, if you like. But actually, if you look at things like some of the interventions that we're talking about, this, there is an element here of trying to improve their experience, trying to drive a better outcome for them, and provide support where required. And I think it is interesting when we start to talk about things like data as well. You have to factor in, as you do with marketing, when you're attracting culture, demographic, age, all these different factors into that tailored experience that you would provide. And it does go back into the difference to utilize the ones that to your point, Elliot, customers are utilizing, or different roles are, because you might have agents, parents, other third parties in there as well, involved in supporting this wider relationship and community anyway, where you're sourcing this information and then actioning that. And the one bit that we were going to talk about was just, I think, the journey that we're now going on with data. So we've always typically worked with clients to implement sort of business solutions across various different industries, and we've been working in higher education and 3 other strategic verticals now for the last 2 years. And data to us, we've always helped with operational reporting. On the back end of those business systems that we put into place, there might be data systems integration and master data management. But now it is getting more, if you can get this data and you can improve the quality by getting adoption of systems and providing systems that support through customer journeys and processes within the business. So you've got your internal customer and external customer, those providing the service and those receiving the service from you. If you can get that better quality data now, as you mentioned, with some of the tools that are already embedded across the Microsoft platforms, you can get into the world of analysing and driving, you know, actionable insight on the back end of that information that you are collecting. You know, you can learn an awful lot more, and you can make that information available to the business, to individuals who are empowered then and enabled to do something with that.
Yeah,
and it's really exciting. We've you know, we're not data scientists by any means or forms. We are looking to build out our capability. We're even, I mean, Louise will know, we've actually got one university that we're doing some research with more on the recruitment side, you know, trying to improve that whole sort of recruitment experience and, you know, process with the use of analytics and AI. We've started in HE. We've got 3 universities that we've approached. We've tried to look at all the different themes and areas in which we believe their own data can drive an improved outcome. So we've talked about sort of recruitment and admissions and those tailored journeys. So as an example, you know, I'll use the word, rightly or wrongly, apologies, it's, you know, forecasting around the student intake. So year on year, you've got students coming back, you've got new students coming in operationally until day one when everyone turns up. How many are actually going to turn up? So, you know, trying to you know, forecast that and predict that as best as you can actually has a huge impact on operations and income, etc. And so as an example, we've gone in and we've started conversations with 3 universities where we're saying, look, let's look at that one area. Let's look at exactly where you have that data today. Look at the different systems and tools, and see if with the use of, you know, data scientists, we can analyse that information and see if we can just improve your forecast by 1%, yeah, as a minimum. And we're then going to work through different pain points. So, yeah, that was more about just, you know, again, linking back to, you know, some of the tools that are in Dynamics, some of the tools that are just embedded across the Microsoft technology platforms, looking at how we can exploit and, you know, help customers get the most out of them, but ultimately links back to data as well, so they can get the most out of their data. And as I said, you know, we're working with 3 universities at the moment, and we're doing this on a kind of proof of concept basis because we're openly learning as we go. So, you know, we'll happily work with any other university. So, you know, Paul, as an example, if you guys were interested in looking at what you might be able to do with your own data, even around, you know, analytics in that space, if there was an initiative there outside of forecasting, because we know there are other areas that Birmingham would like to look at, we'd love to have a conversation to see if that's something we can support.
Yeah, but by all means, drop us an outline proposal. It's quite timely for learning analytics, as I say, because there's a small proof of concept going on, but it's not too late before people have got wedded to certain technical solutions.
Yeah, and I think this is, so, you know, one of the universities that Elliot mentioned, I think the concept of learning analytics, it's out there. There are tools that do these things. I think the tools that are there and the information, the data they are currently gleaming, there are other data sets that could actually be added into that analytical pot, if you like, to look at learning analytics. But even the learning analytics feed into other facets like student experience, student outcomes, etc. So they in its own right, learning analytics is a pool of different data sets, but as one set feeds into other pools of data sets where you're trying to look at other measurements as well. And, you know, I think to Elliot's point, whether you're looking at the kind of customer insights element of Dynamics or sales insights, it's, yeah, forget what they're called. If you've got data in the systems, they are very useful tools that can help you do your analytics. And we're just looking to see how we, you know, can exploit that investment that Microsoft are making with our customers in those areas. So yeah, I'll drop you some information on it, Paul, around, you know, what we're trying to do, a bit more overview around what we're trying to do in education with data anyway. But then, you know, send you some information on the themes that we've looked at and the engagement types that we're offering out to universities at the moment, because, you know, we're in a position where we're trying to collaborate and learn around this area. So it's, you know, yes, we're a commercial organisation, but we appreciate we're trying to learn here and evolve. So it's kind of piloting and proof of concepting, you know, pre-sale activity with the universities that are prepared to actually invest that time and effort with us as well, whilst we explore and validate what that value and offer is that we could take to market.
We have something to look at that. I've got to dive off because I've got a committee meeting starting, but thanks very much, and I'm sure I'll hear from you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Thanks, Paul.
Tom, have you got anything to add?
Can you hear me? Mine's, oh, yeah, no, that was brilliant. That was brilliant, Nathan. And I think from my point of view, it was more. If I just share my screen now quickly. Let me know when you can see it. I just wanted to just conclude really, and just sort of I've put my details and Lou's details on the screen. So we do send out feedback as and when the sessions are completed. Just highlighting some of the sort of services and workshops and engagements that we can offer. And just off the point of what Nathan was talking about around the data POCs, just if you're interested in that, then please contact me, and I can certainly send you more information on that as well.
Thanks, Tom.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom.
Perfect. Jim, have you got any queries or questions?
Perfect. Shall we wrap up there? Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Elliot, for your talk. That was brilliant. As I said, we've got it recorded, so we'll be getting that live on our socials and also on YouTube, and then sent out to our networks also.
Yeah, I've got a lot of contacts to get this shared with. That's really insightful. Thank you ever so much, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Elliot.